Well, software as a service is a fascinating space. For me, it epitomises many of the things that a lot of our customers are looking for in cloud. You know, rock solid reliability, scalability, the ability to create a great customer experience. And there's no other type of business like software as a service where if your site's down, your business is down for good. So it was a great panel and a great discussion. And next up, we have a speaker who we know very well at Rackspace and we're very fond of. And we're going to hear a fascinating story that combines a lot of disparate elements. So what do you get when you combine fantasy football, one of the largest and most demanding organisations in Australia, a few chef cookbooks, one of the hottest digital agencies in Melbourne, and campaigns with massively spiky workloads? You get a very interesting story. And the story about Loud and Clear is one where they've joined with Rackspace to use our Devops Automation service to help them with their Fan Hub application. And before I introduce our speaker, I'm going to play to you a short video which tells a little bit about their story.
Loud and Clear is a digital agency based in Melbourne. We've grown over the last 6 years from a team of 3 people to a team of 50, spread between Melbourne and Europe. Loud and Clear is an agency focused on experience, how people use the web, how they interact with our customers and their brands. About 3 years ago, we started building our own products. We saw a gap in the market for an agency to start building things that we love to use, and Fan Hub was the first of those. Fan Hub builds the official fantasy sports games for a whole range of clients, some of the most popular sports in Australia. The scale that we play with means that if something goes wrong, it's hundreds of thousands of eyeballs on it, and the time to respond needs to be rapid. We knew we needed additional support. For us, that support meant being able to deal with a support team who really understood the infrastructure that our application was running on. When we started talking with the Rackspace team about our application, what was really interesting is that they'd to a large extent done it before. They were able to point to other events that they'd done where they encountered the same pain points and solved them. It felt like we were augmenting our team with a whole bigger team, of sort of global engineers who knew the problems we were solving, had experienced them firsthand and already knew how to approach them.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome one of the founders and the Director of Digital from Loud and Clear, Ben Beath.
Thanks, Angus. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here and share this story with you, and hopefully you find it interesting. It's a story that's not without its challenges, and I'm happy to reveal those to you today. Loud and Clear, as the video mentioned, a digital agency. We service clients in Melbourne and Sydney. Some of our clients include Telstra, Bosch, Sportsbet. We tend to deal with applications that have big audiences and critical real-time availability requirements. We've been going for about 6 years, and as we mentioned, I'm the head of digital. So between all the work we do, the products we build, the widgets that we build for other clients, and the websites that we maintain, about 5 million Australians every month visit a Loud and Clear website or product. It's a big number, and for a digital agency that's independent, that's only a team of 50 people, that's actually a huge number. For our size, we're exposed to a massive audience, and an audience that's really quite demanding. We've grown quickly, and growth doesn't come without its challenges, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And a big part of our team is our development resource. So half of our team are engineers, 50%, 25 developers, spread between Australia and Europe and Ukraine, and that means we lay about 55,000 hours of code every year. Again, a big number for a relatively small digital agency in Melbourne. About 2 years ago, we took our team away to a retreat, and we said, well, who are we as an agency? What do we do? We know we love to build stuff. We don't love doing banners. We don't love doing EDMs. We don't love shilling stuff that we don't believe in. We love building great products. We love building things that inspire people. We know that technology is moving really fast, and as a result, for an agency of our size, innovation for us and for our clients is the safest option. And disruption really does empower greatness. But if you're a CTO or a head of digital like me out there, you'll be thinking, well, disruption to my infrastructure, disruption to my tech stack, doesn't empower greatness. It gives me late nights, it gives me headaches, it gives me the sort of grey hair in the beard that I saw in that video just a moment ago that I wasn't aware of, but came about, I think, because of the story I'm about to tell you now. So this is a story of how we essentially remapped how we delivered the technology platform of our business so that we really could live that idea of disruption empowering greatness. About 3 years ago, we started building products. As mentioned in the video, Sidekicker was one of these. Sidekicker is an on-demand workforce company. You might have seen last week Uber delivering gelato to customers via their app. That was all powered by Sidekicker. Across Australia and New Zealand, there were 500 Sidekickers wandering around the cities distributing ice cream to people who booked it. That's one of Loud and Clear's joint ventures. We've also built a time and attendance software that's used mainly by enterprise clients to combine machine learning, really powerful sort of rich data algorithms with the common task of retail scheduling, and some amazing insights out of that. The topic of today is FanHub. FanHub is really born out of our love of sports. We love sports, and we wanted to build something that essentially created the next generation of fantasy sports. At the moment, we build the official fantasy sports games for the AFL, for the NRL, for the A-League, as well as games for the EPL, CBS, who's the biggest provider of fantasy products in America, as well as the ATP Tennis Tour, and a few others as well. And the thing that occurred to us when we started working with sports is that it was unlike any other product we'd built. And our SLA that we'd crafted over the previous 4 years no longer stacked up. Typically, we had a critical response, or critical event will respond within 15 minutes, and we'll aim to have it fixed within an hour. But when you're dealing with sports, you're dealing with millions of people watching the same thing that happens at that exact time. You can't push that start time back because it's been set months, if not years in advance. You've got absolutely no control over when it starts. And if you take an hour to respond to a critical event, then the game's over in most cases. So we had to completely rework how we delivered technology. We had a crack at it, and we found there were some issues. And the first issue came to head when Cam Smith, so anyone who knows rugby league will know of Cameron Smith, he was in 60% of all NRL fantasy teams, as their captain in most cases. And about 5 minutes before a game last year, he got injured. He got injured in the warm-up and was a late withdrawal. So we had a situation where suddenly hundreds of thousands of people were all simultaneously attempting to do the same thing. They wanted to get Cameron Smith out of their team, they wanted to draft someone else in, and they had about 5 minutes to do it. We were running on dedicated hardware. The dedicated hardware we had was absolutely specced out and amazing, but it was dedicated and it was capped. And essentially when hundreds of thousands of people all attempted to do the same thing simultaneously, we couldn't cope and the site crashed. And the feedback ramifications of that and the disenchantment of our users was immediate, brutal, and took weeks to resolve. So one little hamstring niggle 5 minutes before a game turned into months of headaches. We identified the problem as being, we had a distributed development environment, but we also had distributed accountability. There's an adage in technology, fail quickly and safely. It's very commonly seen when we talk about the cloud. Well, we were nailing the first part of that really well. We weren't doing it safely. When we failed, it was obvious to everyone, our customers, to our direct clients, to the sporting codes, as well as obviously us. And so we had to figure out where the problems were. And we identified 4 things that we thought, okay, these are really the crux of the problem. Firstly, infrastructure failing. We had a dedicated master server that failed. At one point, it took the entire site, it took the entire platform down. Now, it took us an hour to recover from that. We were pretty proud of ourselves that we got it all back up online in an hour. And 5 years ago, I think we would have looked at that as being a real triumph, It was a fairly catastrophic hardware failure. We managed to recover really quickly. In the context of sport, that's ridiculous. An hour, the game was already over. How could you possibly, take so long to resolve this, was the questions we were getting from users. We're also getting incorrect advice. One of the things that happens when you have a number of engineers working on your application is everyone thinks they've got the solution. In our case, database scaling was always active-active. Everyone said, use active-active. But we couldn't, because we couldn't allow even a fraction of lag between our databases replicating. So we had to work with engineers who took the time to understand our code and understand our requirements. Rackspace came to the fore because a couple members of their team are actually avid players of some of our fantasy products. So they were actually starting to fling us advice early in the piece to suggest some ideas of how they could handle that. Lack of continuity was a huge issue as well. There's nothing worse than having an issue at 9 o'clock at night, the Australian team's gone home, and now you're dealing with an overseas support team who has no idea about what your application does, who your users are, or what the critical needs are. And when you've got a critical incident, having to start from scratch, explaining, here's what we do, here's why we do it, please don't suggest active-active, oh no, they've suggested active-active. Having to explain that every time you have a critical incident is really time-consuming. And lastly, this myth of after-hours support. A number of Australian providers who we talked to said, yeah, we've got after-hours support. But what that really meant was you were speaking to a level 3 support engineer who was then frantically trying to wake up a level 2 support engineer, who would then wake up the level 1 support engineer, and then finally, after half an hour to 45 minutes, you'd be speaking to the person who you needed to speak to all along. So we identified these as being the 4 major issues we needed to resolve. If we don't get it right, this is the sort of feedback you get. I'll leave it to your imagination to guess what the items in red are. But this... This is brutal. When you've spent 2 years building a platform that is absolutely cutting edge, that is lightweight, scalable, all built on Angular, it's beautiful, data's moving through it at high speed, but you're being let down because of bad RAM in a dedicated instance, and everyone thinks that your product is rubbish because of it. That's really dispiriting. And that led sort of my technical team, my colleagues and I, to say, okay, what are we going to do for 2015? How are we going to completely reinvent our technology stack so that we don't find ourselves getting that sort of feedback? We came up with this approach, which we called 03E. 03E. The 0 stands for 0% downtime. We actually can't go down, ever. We can never go offline. The moment we do, like last year when we attempted to, just to do some critical maintenance, we had support emails within 30 seconds. We had tweets coming in. We had people tweeting at NRL, why is this down? We were down for scheduled maintenance, but we realized we actually can't go down because people play our games around the clock, around the world. 3 seconds max load time. We had to scale quickly in line with increased traffic. Just because Cam Smith decided to pull his hammy just before the game doesn't mean that users will accept a slow response time. In fact, they want the opposite. They expect the site to be running faster if they need to do something urgently. And lastly, this idea of executing exceptional experiences. Not just for our customers, but also for our colleagues. We didn't want the stress of being up all hours of the night, of having to rework technology on the fly. We wanted something that was scalable, that was repeatable, and that we could learn from with every single product we built. So we came up with a game plan. Firstly, migrate our apps to the cloud. It seemed obvious, but there were some technical challenges there, especially around scaling. We knew we wanted to implement auto-scaling, because in the case of Cam Smith, we really probably needed 50 dedicated 50 instances up to cater for that moment, for that surge traffic. Instead, we had a couple of dedicated servers that failed almost immediately. But most importantly, we needed to find an ops capability that could support our devs. We could work with them one-on-one, a really close solution-driven relationship. After a lot of consideration, we went with Rackspace. And we went with Rackspace when it became apparent to us that this fanatical support isn't just a marketing thing. It's a tangible part of their offering, and arguably the most important thing to me of what they do. So what we've got now is engineers who understand our application. They actually have access to our code base. We have access to their repositories as well for our auto-scaling. Many months have been spent on working through how our application behaves, how surge traffic behaves, and then we've leveraged a lot of Rackspace's experience from other massive sporting events they've worked on around the world. So rather than be a small team of 25 developers taking on the world with fantasy sports, we've got access now to 4,500 people who've been delivering big events for years. We need to follow the sun support. But what we needed was not to just someone to answer the phone. We needed someone who could jump straight on and help us out. And we've got that with Rackspace. They've taken the time to have engineers in the UK and America upskilled in our application. So we've always got someone any time of day there ready to help us out. Engineers on the deck during big event days was a Rackspace suggestion, a big part of their SLA, and a real game changer for us. It meant that when we have our big launches, we've got Rackspace engineers there with us, ready to immediately jump on any problems that materialise. And the most exciting one for me is this direct engagement between our devs and Rackspace engineers. This is a Slack chat, which I've edited because it had a whole heap of chef sort of stuff in it. But basically, when we have a problem, we just type help into Slack. I don't know what happens at Rackspace when we do that. I like to imagine that there's all sorts of sirens and bells and stuff going off, but whatever happens, someone responds. In this case, Simon, who's the head of Devops Automation here in Sydney. What's really exciting about this is some of my Ukraine colleagues, right? So at I think 9 o'clock at night there, interacting with an Australian support engineer, you can see that rather than hang around for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes trying to get help, trying to get the right person, within 2 minutes, we're into solution mode. And when you're talking about big events, when you're talking about mission-critical infrastructure, for a dev to be able to go, help, I've just seen that there could be an issue in New Relic with our calculation server. Our calculation server ingests a huge amount of sports data, then turns it into a readable format for our front end. There might be an issue, and then within 2 minutes, that issue is being worked on. And not by a level 1 support who's working out who do I wake up without pissing them off, but it's actually the engineer who built the auto-scaling who's looking at it right away. That, to me, is fanatical support. It's a level of service that, I guess, gave us the confidence to say, well, where can we go next? And where we went next was Devops Automation. This was a huge cultural shift. For 5 years, we, in terms of our technical team, held all the control. If we deployed one of our applications, it was our team deploying it. If we fired up a new instance, if we fired up a new server, it was our team ordering it, even if we had on-premise support configuring it. Rackspace came to us and said, we think we can do your DevOps better than you are. Now, that was confronting to me, to our devs, and it was a huge cultural piece to actually go, well, you know what? It was a horrible realization that Rackspace was right. You saw in the previous Slack chat that the dev part and the ops part were already working together really well. And DevOps works best when you have that sort of organic, solution-driven communication. It's all happening there in the chat. Rackspace then started looking at our automation. And what that's done is build us a highly scalable application that allows us to focus as a team on what we do really well. So we've essentially got about 500 hours a month back that previously we were spending on automation, on configuring instances, deploying new instances, deploying staging environments, tearing them down, all that sort of stuff, testing them. That's all automated now, and we spend an extra 500 hours a month on building features. Automation is done by the team who knows the infrastructure. Rackspace is getting more out of their infrastructure than we, I think, could have done if we'd done it by ourselves. And we've got this benefit of a global team of engineers. So in that Slack chat that I showed you a moment ago, what was happening there in that chef sort of log that was coming into Slack was that Simon, one of the DevOps engineers in Rackspace Sydney, had some ideas on how we could scale the MySQL databases a bit better. So he was working on that in the staging environment and then automatically pushing that through to staging so that our devs could pick it up when they came online, give it a test, and then if we were happy with it, roll it into production. It's a huge shift, and it means that we're now comfortably failing quickly and failing safely. Not only that, we've now got applications that are smarter than ever before. To deploy our fantasy platform now, all one of our devs has to do is load a script, boot up one instance on Rackspace, load a script onto it, and then run that script. And that script will then go and grab the source code from GitHub. It'll go and build all the instances that the application needs to run on. It'll test them all. If it passed testing, it'll configure New Relic and get New Relic online. It'll give it all another test. And then it will let the dev know that stack, that deployment that you wanted to do, is now ready to go. Come and have a look at it. And when you get to the point where you've got applications that are essentially building themselves out on the cloud, you've got your devs now focused on other stuff. And that means that we do on average 3 to 4 deployments a week across our platform with no downtime. Our customers have no idea that we've just deployed a major feature upgrade or a bug fix. All they have are these moments of delight as they see a new feature that suddenly appeared that wasn't there yesterday. Failing quickly and failing safely, for me, is really what DevOps and DevOps automation is all about. Thanks very much for your time. I'll be around for questions afterwards.